really know how to categorize myself because I didn't really have a formal, diagnosis. I was really just the night of our Passover Seder, and it was not the matzah because I love matzah. Seriously, I had a really bad stomach ache, and it just wasn't going away. And I just remember being in a ton of pain, and everything else I just remember from the stories told to me. It was a blood clot, and that was really, that was really all it was. And then, when doctors told me I couldn't eat or drink, that was a very hard reality to deal with in the hospital. But, in the hospital, you're also in your nest, so you're kind of protected. My family was there. So the worst part was when, they did all this wonderful work to to medically stabilize me. And, months later in the hospital, they really wanted to kick us out because, I was just running marathons around the unit. My mom was in my bed watching Everyone Loves Raymond. My brother was dating one of the night nurses. Whatever happened to Genevieve? But the worst part was when they were ready to give my ICU bed to the kids that needed it. Columbia Presbyterian Hospital. It was the 48 sickest kids in America floated there, and I went from being the sickest kid there to the kid that just did not belong there. But anyway, so they discharged me, and they said, you're medically stable, but you can't eat or drink. So go on and kind of do your thing, live your life, and we'll stay in touch. My people. And so, I mean, that was the worst because everywhere there's coffee and sinks, and my mom was petrified that I was gonna go home and forget and eat a pretzel. I don't know how you would forget that, but that was her biggest fear. She wanted to tape the sink shut or something. But it was a very scary way to live. So I had to, purposely numb myself and find ways to not feel hunger, which is basically just shut off all your emotion. Now, when you're healing from trauma, you're not really supposed to do that. So I was really living in two worlds. Does anyone love Joseph Campbell as much as I do in the archetypal hero's journey? I'll get to that, but the end product of the journey is mastery of the two worlds, where the hero goes into this darkness and fights all these battles and comes back with a gift to give society. He's transformed by what he learns. So I was that's how I visualized it. I kind of had my feet in both worlds, trying to think well, I want to live and find the meaning of life, but I'm also kind of supposed to barricade myself from the full experience of being life. And for an uncertain amount of time. The point of my little detour concept was I was dealing with a lot of uncertainty. Waiting so long to be able to eat was because, my insides had to fully heal, but more than that, we had to kind of find someone who could get creative and figure out what to do to make me a stomach. So my dad called the head of NIH, and he said, you need a surgeon. You basically need someone that has the nerve to take all the cases that no one else wants. And so that was at Yale Hospital, and it was, in a few parts. It was a 19-hour surgery and 3 shifts of nurses and doctors, which worked for a week. And then I went to California, and the whole thing in healing from post-traumatic stress disorders is you're supposed to take a breath and ground yourself and say, okay, I'm being triggered by this, but the trauma was then and not now. So I would eat and think wow, my stomach really feels like it's gonna explode. And I'd no, that was before this. Yeah. And then my I'm laughing, but as I was crying. But then my wound really does explode a week later, which I mentioned really briefly in my TED talk that after all of that I had to be airbacked across the country to Yale, and that was the scariest for me because for the first time I really saw that doctors were actively trying to figure out what to do. And I really almost lost hope that any answers would we have. So I want to move along with this to show you how I found this magic hope. These were the symptoms. I became like the queen of PTSD. Like every one of these symptoms, especially dissociation, I became like very good, understandably, about not feeling anything. I could easily just like switch like in and out of that, as a protective skill, really, which is kind of how I survived not eating or drinking. Now, what I want to, my beautiful, see, I'm an artist. Now, what really helped me was, I think, because I was born like a musical theater ham, and I always had that creative spirit, and I was always kind of like a overachiever, type A, like go, go, go. And I think the third benefit was that I was never really sick before this, so I didn't really know how to act like a victim. But waking up from a coma, I think my biggest fear was like, oh my God, like I'm not going to be relevant anymore. Like I want to, I didn't want to be a has-been at 18. And it was so strange for me, to see all these people like feel bad for me, and that made me like anxious and angry. Like, don't feel bad. Like I'm like I was a dancer and I'm fine, and the psychiatrist that came in the hospital thought I was in denial because I was still saying I was a dancer, and my family around me was still acting like I was healthy. So basically, they all wanted to diagnose us with ICU psychosis because they thought we were like, why didn't we understand the severity of the situation? But that was really, our container. That was really how we kind of barricaded ourselves from this crazy world and maintained our sanity. And I think this mentality, like acting like things were normal, and making fun of things that didn't feel so normal, that was how I got through. A month after being discharged from the hospital, even though I couldn't eat or drink, I just auditioned. A community theater was doing a local production of Oliver, and I was so yellow from the TPN, which is the intravenous fluid that I was on to feed me through my veins. But I'm like, you know what? I miss being part of a community. That's what I love about theater. This will be good for me. And so I tried out, and I ended up getting the lead. They double cast me because I think they thought I was going to fall over. But even though it was difficult, and I had to be hooked up to TPN at 10 o'clock every night because it had to be cycled. So my dad actually joined in the chorus. So like at 10 o'clock. But I think that really helped me get through. I imagined, this whole uncertain stream, in front of me. I thought like if I can make these like creative containers, like here and then there and then there, I didn't have to think of the whole picture. I could get through a little step at a time, which is why like right after I did Oliver, I really missed like going to Stop and Shop. We don't have Stop and Shop here. You have where were we? Publix. That's better than Stop and Shop. But I missed just having that human feeling of just going grocery shopping. So I started a chocolate business so I could buy candies, and what I realized was just like the tactile experience of just playing with food was some kind of, everyone else thought it was torture, but I can't, explain it. You become obsessed with what you don't have. Like, in the Child Life Center, when I was in the hospital, all the kids who couldn't eat or drink, they were always the ones that wanted to play in the toy kitchen. You have this fascination, which is why I was like hoarding collection of like Cooking Light and watching the Food Network all day in my room. I guess it was giving some kind of relatable distance to it, and it worked. Anyway, let's see what's next on my pretty slide. Okay, this says, do people know Peter Levine and Waking the Tiger? This was a book that really changed my life, because the point was, even though finding these like safe containers of creativity, I was dealing with all this pent up stuff that I didn't know what to do with. It was frightening to me because I knew that if I really like mourned my losses and felt anger and felt fear, I could lose control, and that could mean death, because I could, get hungry, and that I could not let myself get like depressed, because I didn't want to lose it. It was really survival, literally. But I don't even know how I discovered Peter Levine, but reading his take on energy really empowered me, because the whole thing was he was observing like animals, in the wild, and he was like, okay, like a gazelle's like running, and it gets pounced on by whatever pounced on gazelles, I guess, I don't know.
Lions.
Lions, that was it. Okay, and so it'll play dead, but then after that, just keep like galloping and galloping, and then it'll be fine, it'll move on. So like he gets over it. So like what makes us freeze? And then he's like, oh, because that's the gazelle's way of naturally discharging that energy, and then it can just move it through. But like humans, we have a cerebral cortex, so we don't let ourselves fully discharge that. So when I started thinking of all this like terrible stuff I was feeling, as like energy, I'm like, oh, like I like energy. Like I create with it, I do things with it. Like rather than this like big cloud over my head, I didn't know what to do with. Like let me find ways to actively transform it. And I thought of I always love biology, like the law of conservation of energy. You can't get rid of energy. So all these like destructive coping mechanisms, and all those kind of things, and feeling guilty and feeling run by this cloud of stuff, let me harness that. This was actually a mixed media painting I made called My World Has Split, and that's really how I felt. This is like my hospital self, this is my school self, and I discovered art by accident. I never had an art lesson in my life, but this is all just like fabric I cut up, and it was all just very like primal and just, but again, it was my container, and it's amazing how just the act of creating didn't do anything but make a canvas, but somehow it moved me through that feeling that I felt at that time. This is just a list of felt sensations that really helped me. It's what Peter Levine talks about, like when we feel this like energy kind of like overwhelming us, like let's like label it in terms of like don't judge it, but what is like the actual physical feeling? And then once you can like label it as just an objective, like oh, how does it feel? Like oh, this energy feels like thick, locked, open. Then you can actually like do something to shape it, like let's see, like I don't know, like anxiety's feeling like wobbly. Okay, now I'm thinking like objectively in terms of this wobbly energy. What can I do with a wobble? I can be a penguin. I don't know. So what did I write here? So you'll see like a lot of my art like has to do with like that feeling of dissociation, like a lot of like polarity and things, and so I found a few containers, and humor, as you can tell by my wonderful sense of humor. Humor was a big container, and in my One Woman show, which I'm gonna get to actually, man, I hate 45 minutes. You'll see how I found that singing tree. I don't know if you noticed the mural on the back, but this is kind of my trademark painting. This is the first time I picked up a paintbrush in Yale Hospital, and talk about like the container that I feel like really saved my life. My mom just started bringing like these just kid craft art supplies to the hospital, and I was always into musical theater, but I had never painted before. So another like gift of this detour. I never would have been an artiste. But for when you're in that frame of mind where you're just like crossing your arms at the world, you're just like, I don't even care anymore. Like I'm not gonna even try. I was so mad, at these doctors that had just made me do this whole stupid surgery for nothing. But I remember one morning I was just in the hospital. We were in Yale Hospital for like 3 months, and I just remember I was feeling so just low and anxious and like shaking to the point where like I couldn't even like numb that energy. It just became like so intense that I just remember thinking like I can't do anything else. Let me just pick up this paintbrush. And I remember